More lawmakers are calling this morning for an investigation into the Signal group chat, where national security officials added a journalist, Jeffrey Goldberg, to a discussion about attack plans. But the White House is trying to say the case is closed. Senate Democrats sent a letter to the Attorney General yesterday asking for a special counsel to look into the national security breach. House Democrats on the Intel Committee made a similar request to the Director of National Intelligence. Some Republican lawmakers also voicing concerns. On Sunday, Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma said an independent investigation is, quote, entirely appropriate. A number of House Republicans also echoing that sentiment. But the White House maintains there's nothing more to do here.
I mean, it's real. I think the words speak for themselves. I mean, it's been made public. I do think, I know Senator Roger Wicker has requested an IG investigation into this. And I think the real question is, were any American lives put at risk by this?
Do you think they were?
I don't know. I don't know. But I think that's the question.
As the president has made it very clear, Mike Waltz continues to be an important part of his national security team. And this case has been closed here at the White House as far as we are concerned. There have been steps made to ensure that something like that can obviously never happen again. And we're moving forward. And the president and Mike Waltz and his entire national security team have been working together very well. If you look at how much safer the United States of America is because of the leadership of this team.
So, John, you have some Senate Democrats suggesting this needs to go to the Attorney General and that Pam Bondi needs to do something about it. The problem is she has said a couple of times now that this was just a mistake and it's time to move on, acting more like a White House spokesperson than the Attorney General.
Yeah, the Department of Justice has made clear they want nothing to do with this. The FBI as well. They're not going to look into this matter. We heard that was White House Press Secretary Karen Leavitt gaggling on the driveway yesterday, suggesting that the White House considers the matter closed. As I reported last week, there's certainly some deep unhappiness in Trump world, particularly about Mike Waltz, the national security advisor, that they feel like this was sloppy, it was a distraction, but the president doesn't want to give, in his words, a scalp to Democrats, and particularly the media. He was reminded of how chaotic his first term was, a lot of early exits, including his then national security advisor, Mike Flynn. Mm-hmm. They don't want to go down that road again. I don't think Waltz's job security is, I think, still somewhat tenuous. But Mike Allen, he's not going anywhere, at least not yet. And we're seeing the White House desperately try to turn the page. And tomorrow they're going to get a lot of headlines from Liberation Day because the economy is probably going to react very poorly to that. But talk to us about what you're hearing from Republicans, because there does a sense. I talked to some Trump advisors. We talked about this on the show yesterday. This is the first story they feel like, well, this one's stuck. Like, this one has done some damage. And their efforts to turn the page quickly, it may not work.
That's right. And a big factor in that is the fact that the National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz, already had some people who didn't like his style, didn't like some of his personnel choices. There was a feeling that there's a former Green Beret, a former congressman who's used to being the star, and he's now National Security Advisor, is a staff role. And he has a big boss, Susie Wiles, the chief of staff, and a very big boss, the president. And so Axios reports that behind the scenes, flying back from Greenland, the Vice President Vance, Mike Waltz, both in Greenland, on the way back, the vice president had a little talk with Waltz about working collaboratively. And that's why he's there for a while. And the president, who behind the scenes considered firing him, but cooled down, talked himself out of it. And he is keeping this team for a while, does not want to give a win to critics.
So interesting. Not only has this stuck, it's the style in which the White House went to push back the Signal story that I think really turned a lot of people off. Sort of the arrogant pushback, blaming the reporter, lots of different reasons. Look over here, look over there. And especially for military families, the Signal chat scandal, the revelation as to how they were so flagrantly communicating about an imminent attack, all caps, emojis. For military families, that really cuts deep because they need to know that they can trust the defense sector, the foreign policy experts, the national security advisors, the defense secretary, and those who run our military, John Heilemann, in a way that makes them know that this country is doing everything they can to keep their family members safe. And that clearly was such a breach. It's chilling. And so the pushback for them especially, and this is what I've heard personally, was even more upsetting because they don't know what to believe now.
Right. And, you know, Mika, obviously, I think that is something. There's been reporting on this in a bunch of places, including the New York Times, about the ripple through active duty, the families of active duty military currently, and in the veterans community. This is one of these things where Donald Trump has, over the course of his time in public life, done a lot of things, said a lot of things, is reported to have said a lot of things that people thought on the face of them should have alienated the community, the constituency of veterans and military, including some things that Jeff Goldberg reported in the past. And yet none of them have really stuck to Trump. This is a little different, and I think you may be on to something, because unlike some of those cases where it was still the case that if Trump claimed fake news, he said, 100 times, even though there have been lots of corroborations of it, that he never referred to people in the military as suckers and losers. If you wanted to believe that was fake news, there was no recording of it. You could be convinced by Donald Trump that was fake news. This is one of these stories that really has transcended politics, and it's one of those stories that's really cut into the culture because it's such a relatable story. And maybe this is the kind of thing that will have more of a lasting effect on the way that people in the military and veterans of the military look at Donald Trump and the people around him, because this is the thing that no one's really denying that it happened.
Right.
You can't deny that it happened. And the way the pushback is being handled, as you said, is very, I'd say, not just disingenuous, but disrespectful.
Yeah, and to add to that, John, just one other thing. I don't think it's specifically Trump. I think it's the people around him that they are really questioning him. Mike Waltz opened the chat,
Sure.
included Jeffrey Goldberg, and then proceeded to defame him and accuse him of somehow sneaking into the chat, which is ludicrous. But then you have Pete Hegseth. And you have the Secretary of Defense seemingly excitedly announcing these attack plans on Signal in all caps, and really seeming to enjoy being able to release this information to a large group of people in a number of places over a commercial app, which is just beyond irresponsible for anyone. And you don't have to be in the intelligence community to know this. Then add to that the recent reports that he's bringing his wife and other family members to high-level meetings. It just doesn't feel serious. And if you're a member of the military or you're a family member of someone in the military, this is as serious as a heart attack. And nothing about it is funny, and no excuse that is given is enough. They want answers. They want changes in policies and procedures. They want to know this isn't happening right now, and it will never happen again. And nothing that the White House or Pete Hegseth or Mike Waltz has done has helped with that at all. John Heilemann and Mike Allen, thank you both very much for coming on this morning.